today I'm sharing my 10 best tips for saving money when you're making a journal. And although the title of this video mentions junk journal, the tips that I'm going to share today are relevant to any sort of journal making or indeed papercraft more broadly. I've been playing with paper and making journals, notebooks, pockets, tags, all sorts of ephemera for years and years. So I thought that I would illustrate the points that I'm making today by taking you on a little journey around my craft room and sharing lots and lots of examples. If you'd like to know more about what a junk journal actually is, then I've put a video answering that question in the description box down below. But before you click on that, here are the tips for you to take a screenshot, and I'll also put these for you on my Pinterest page for free, along with over 60 others. My first tip for you today is to make the most of books, and I'm just showing you here a small sample, probably the more organised part, of my book collection, and these are lined up on a chest of drawers. They got organised quite recently. So make the most of books is, well, a pretty general statement and perhaps an obvious one for many of you. So I'm going to show you my pretty much entire book collection generally. I thought we could deep dive into a few examples of things I often make with them, and then perhaps just have a look at the categories of books that I'm suggesting you use to try and make sure you don't overbuy, and see what I've got in those categories, because you might like some of those too. This is the collection that's, yeah, as you can see, birds and flowers, and I've actually got some larger books down here. This is probably my favourite area in my craft room to come and pull for some images or some pages. But let me show you what else I've got on the other side of my room. So I don't have one of those craft rooms that's full of beautiful white IKEA boxes and shelves. I have a thing that's grown organically, to be honest, and it's definitely grown, but I absolutely love it. And this is the kind of stuff that's in it. So these books here are ideally, I think I've pretty much got it right, not flowers and birds. They are some of the more, I'll say ugly, they're still useful, gardening books. I've got some children's books, but they're definitely larger books. I've got some really interesting ones that I acquired recently at the end. So you can see some glossy book pages will be in this gardening book here. Lots of gardening books that have got photographs in as opposed to drawn images. A couple of atlases. This book I use time and time again. I'm on about my second or third version. I make pockets out of those. And then tucked behind this mirror that's leaning against my cubicles, I'm actually standing on a little raised element here to get at these. I've got some of my journals that I write in and I've filled, so all of those have got filled pages. And this is a really nice area of proper vintage books. So I do use these as well. So you can see I've got books in broad areas, and that really helps me find things when I want them. And then I also have a few on the floor. In fact, the ones on the floor are probably the ones that featured in my organisation video some time ago. Let's just have a look at those. And like I said, this is not going to be a super beautiful look at how I've got everything organised video. This is me just deciding it's time to share some behind the scenes footage. This is needing some tidy up, but there is something of order to these. These are big and tall, but I want to get at them more frequently than the ones you've just seen on the top of the cubicles. And particularly, I've separated out what I call the dictionary type, the academic. So ones like these, with more like a textbook page. I think this is an accounting one with lovely thin pages. And I've got dictionaries and thesauruses here. I've got tall, thin, awkwardly shaped ones here. Let's just pull one out. This is a brilliant one for making little pouches because of the size of it. It's some sort of book about all sorts of places in Britain, and although it's glossy paper, the paper's quite thick, so that's beautiful and lovely. I've also got some enormous ones here. So this one, I've used map pages out of it. I really like that one. And this little one, Beauty, is a recent addition. That featured in a video recently where I made super flat wallets. You can see the size of it. Look at that. And the images in it are absolutely stunning. So that's my broad collection, and I'd love to know what your collection is like. It's not a competition about size, but I would be very interested to know what sorts of books you acquire and indeed where you get them from. Mine are pretty much all donations, or they come from charity shops, and I've started to get a bit more disciplined about what I buy, and I've started to say no to myself when I go in a charity shop and I see something that I've already got or got enough of. So we could most definitely be here all day if I said let's just walk through every sort of thing I make and everything I've made. But I thought I would pull out one or two of the journals that I've made and filled, because I definitely use book pages for those. And we can have a look at some pockets and some journal cards that I haven't actually shared before, and maybe worthy of mention are tags and some other sorts of ephemera. I don't want to get too bogged down in just the first tips. So why don't we have a quick flick of this little journal, and he's a chubby one, and he's a good example of using book pages to actually make the journal signature. I know that journals come in all sorts of forms, and some of the journals I've been making more recently have got more writing space. This is definitely a phase where I was absolutely enjoying, and I still am, filling it with more arty style pages. I think, as the cover shows, this was a Junk Journal January with Meg Journals. So I was filling a page a day in a January, and the pages themselves I may have covered with music paper and a hand-drawn flower, but the pages themselves, as you can see here, are book pages. And I like the eclectic style of using book pages for the basic page. I also like having pages that are not all the same size, and you can get that when you're using book pages. You can also use really big pages and fold up at the bottom to have a pocket like that. So you can see behind a lot of these we've got, actually I think that's a pre-made journal page, so something I made offline and then stuck in, speeded things up. Don't think that's cheating. So lots of ways to use your book pages for the actual pages in a journal, and of course makes it a lot cheaper than if you're buying scrapbook paper. Quick flick of some others, one or two, very quickly. Some of these are quite old now, but I can't get rid of them. I couldn't possibly sell them. That's another Junk Journal January. I wanted to use fabric, but the pages of these are, again, book page. And I get a little bit of a, I'll call it a launch, when I look at a book page in a more arty style or collage style journal. If it's absolutely perfect scrapbook paper, I don't get the same reaction as I do if I use a book page for that basic page in a signature. This is my, I think it's Tatty Birds with Posh Tails that I did for one of my videos for Junk Journal January. But again, lots of uses of book pages underneath all of these items. I could go on. I'm not saying my stuff's brilliant, but I just enjoy it. And I hope you have a passion for paper in the same way and really get the same enjoyment level out, because it's such a wonderful hobby to just play like this. So this box here is just some of my similar journals. Right at the beginning, I didn't really know much about making journals when I started playing, but I've made them in all sorts of styles and I just see what I like. This is a really old one. Do you remember this one from probably about 5 years ago? So again, I was using lots of different types of book page and just having fun adding some sorts of spreads to them. So maybe that's enough of pages in a journal. I also wanted to share a little bit of what's in this wallet. So this is a recent project. This is a pocket journal. So again, using book pages, here we go, to make pockets, and the pocket itself features on the front of this journal. And then I think inside of each of these, I've also added pockets. So this is a little pocket made from a book page, and I've just used that as a little flap out. Hard to do with one hand, this. This has got a few cute pages in to write, space to write, and I've also added a pocket in the centre. That's a little flap. So all of these are being made with, this was actually made with a large glossy book page. There's an example, and these are all just different examples of that pocket journal, some with pockets on the front and some inside. But because of the way I made them, you've actually got a pocket space here. The base of these is junk mail, but they're really, really good fun. And as you can see, I've got book page on the front here. I've just stamped on it, sprayed water, and then let the ink flow, and it makes for a beautiful cover. I've matched that up with a very pretty ribbon. So all of these have got tons of book pages integrated into them. What have we got here? And another pocket. This is a porthole pocket. So it's just got a circle cut out so that you can decorate with collage behind. And that's made from a book page as well. So many things you can make with your book pages. So one last collection that I haven't shared before, sitting in this wallet, is how I use book pages in my journal cards. So I thought I'd just turn a few of these over and show you, because book pages are featuring fundamentally every time I make this sort of style. So I've used some printables on these, but on the back of each of them, I start with a layer of book page. I used up my scraps of cardstock, and that's why they're in all sorts of different sizes. On some of these I've sewn around them, and I think on some they have faux stitching. But you can see again, I've got just a base on the back of book page. And I think often for these, I use book pages with very small type. So that might be a Shakespeare book. I do tend to use that quite a lot. So on the front I've got more of the feature, and on the back again we've got it on the side. We've got book page there, and another one. We've got some on here. We've got over stamping, so stamping over a picture, which I quite like doing, and then I painted it. And on the back I've got a very nice image. I think that's Tracy Fox, but it's sitting on a book page, and then what I've done is go around it with a watercolour pencil just to give it a bit of an outline. So the principle for these is using a book page, and it makes them quite thick, so it just adds an extra layer, and I think it adds a really beautiful level of quality to each of them. On this one, I don't know if you can see, got a little bit of shimmer. I just went around the edge of that pear with a little bit of metallic paint. And again, I've got book page on the back. I think I've got a little bit down here. It is the most valuable resource, and there is no limit to what we can do with book pages. There's always something else we can do and something else we can learn. I make masterboards by layering them and gluing them together. And I've done that to create ephemera using really cheap and free supplies. So you've got little circles that you can stick into your journal on any sort of page or even on the cover. And another thing I do with them is obviously make tags, and I've got a box on my desk over there that's just full of them because I make tags in all sorts of designs. Sometimes I do a masterboard type base to make a tag, or again sometimes I would just use a top level book page on a piece of cardstock and then decorate that and turn it into a tag. So this is the corner of the craft room that we were looking at earlier. So I thought I would pull just a few of those books off the shelf. So these are the ones that you see on my desk with the overhead camera, but now we're in reality of the messy corner that I live with. But I love these books, so let me just show you one or two. So birds and flowers are probably my favourite. And one of the most popular ones you might have seen is this one. I don't know if you remember this from years ago. So C.F. Tunnicliffe Sketches of Bird Life, and it's got these sorts of images, and I used this to make a folio. I used it to make these folios. Do you remember these? We had so much fun making these. Let me open one and just show you what's inside. So do you remember the video where we made this? My old girlfriends might remember. Let me know down below if you remember making this. And this has got some of my beautiful images from that book, and I made several of them, and I was absolutely obsessed at the time, and looking at them again, I think it's probably time to make a few more. So that's one of my favourites. I know a few of you bought the same one as well. Another favourite that I've mentioned many times is a Victorian flower album, and I have flicked through this many times. I hope you can see the joy of this one. One of the types of book has got thicker pages than another. They're the same images, but if you buy it online, some of them are thinner pages. So some I use for making wallets, and some I use for even covers of junk journals. And I also want to mention some birds. So I got up here, let's have the Book of British Birds. There we go. And just look at this. I haven't used this yet, but I couldn't leave it. This was in a charity shop. I couldn't leave that on the shelf. I just couldn't. So I'm going to do something with it. Suggestions on a postcard. And what I may have shown in last week's video is I used something similar to this. This is called the Illustrated Book of Birds. I used something very similar to cover a junk mail envelope, and it's one of those gorgeous hand-drawn images. You get an image on each page and some text, and obviously the mirror image on the other side, but some gorgeous images about birds in this one. So just to give you a flavour of some of the books I've got on this shelf, and I've got to show you one more. So up here I have got, underneath my wax melts pot that I use for ironing on my papers, a whole load of the Reader's Digest books, which have got stunning images in them, and I've used those for the fronts of those pocket journals. But I've got the whole collection here, I think. Trees and Shrubs, Wildflowers, Birds of Britain, Birds of Britain, and Birds of Britain. And I don't mind that I've got 3, because I do go through them. They're just a really great basic, because it's so quick to make lots and lots of pockets with them. So that's my first tip about, my first 3 tips about books. Let's talk about organisation. The next tip I've got is about how to organise, or rather my suggestion that you do organise your smaller items so that you know what you've got, so that you can get at them and you know where they are when you want to fill a page. And if you don't do that, you can spend so much time looking for things and probably not even use some of the things you have got. And then what we do is we buy again, don't we? So I wanted to share what I've done in this chest of drawers. This is a relatively recent organisational step for me. And I know you can just see lots of wallets at the moment. So let me talk about what's in here, and also what's in the drawer below here. So I have split my smaller items of ephemera, my little mini projects, things that you stick on a page, into work in progress, the ingredients, the component parts. So that's this drawer. Why don't we pull a few things out? And then the drawer below is things that I've finished, and I've got a few of. So component parts, I've got, let's pick an example, things I've cut out. Now if you don't have something like this in an organised place, you just will never use them. And it needs to be fun and easy to do when we're filling a journal, doesn't it? So this is a child's dictionary that I cut up. I like the text, So I put those in there and some images, I think, some little map page images. So little ingredients that need to be separated, or they just get into a mixture with everything else and you never pull on them. So I've got pictures of little animals here. I've got some printables. I've got a batch of postcards here, so I know where they are. What else have we got? Let's have a good rummage. Different types of images that I've cut out here. I've got some birds that I've just roughly cut round. They are printables, so I know if I want to have some more I can cut those out. I've got some digitals there. They are little ticket style numbers. I've also got small pieces of fabric. I'm starting to use fabric more, so I suspect I'll need a different solution for my fabric. I've got small pieces of paper in here which I know I can make into my vertical clusters. I just grab 2 or 3 little pieces and run my sewing machine up and down one of those, and it just gives you texture on a page. I've got, this is a nice one, pages that I've stamped and painted. I did those some time ago and I really enjoy painting, stamping and painting on pages. It's very, very relaxing. I tend to add a little bit of a floor, just go off piste and do what you like. I've got pages that I've torn out of small books, so I know what I've got there. To some extent, I rely on memory to know what's in the drawer, but at least I've got stuff in a relatively organised fashion. Book pages that give me some beautiful images, so those are from the books above me. And so it's a really, really useful drawer. This is squares of paper that I've torn up, and I would use those to make my handmade flowers. So that's the drawer of part used stuff, part made up. It's getting to be quite full. And this is the drawer, which is probably nicer stuff, of stuff that's pretty finished. So in here I've got, for example, my porthole pockets, and now I know where they are. I do use them more often. So those are really nice. Let's have a look at those. So again, I think we saw one of those earlier on the inside of a pocket journal. What else? I've got my random style of pockets that I make. I just pick up a piece of paper, a book page, fold it in any way, and then turn it into a pocket by sewing around it on my sewing machine. Like that. They're all sorts of shapes. Very, very simple, but very, very quick. I've got the Reader's Digest pockets here, you can see. There's a bird one, another bird one, but a whole collection ready made up, which makes it a lot quicker to put things together when you do have a journal to decorate. There's my finished little clusters with a bit of sewing just running up and down it. They're nice for decorating the side of a journal page. And other little things that I've made, things that go over the top of a page. I've got little envelopes in here. So these are my, I don't know what the video's called. There's videos on everything here that I've made. So these are using a textbook page, and I've obviously put some nice collage on the back and the front. So an envelope there, and I've got a stack of those. I like to make a few of the same thing at once I get going, and that's faster. That's the same style of envelope, but bigger. I think you get the gist. Also, there's some more of those clusters, but I've been using different types of snippets on those. I've got some little, I think these are the ingredients of I've got some finished books, little notebooks. No, they're not, they're journal cards. They're journal cards, they do need a sewing machine running around them. So I've got an odd bit of snippet on there, it adds texture. Just need to go around them, just using old bits of paper to make those. And I found this to be a bit of a game changer, having this lot sorted. I'll be honest, I was putting them in little plastic tubs before now, and it was just filling up all sorts of surfaces, and this way they're neatly in drawers. The big projects that I have, So these are the sorts of things I make in an individual video, get bundled up when I've finished the video and put into one of these large wallets. And I think I showed a couple of these last week in a video for how I actually store some of my gutted book pages. So what I've found to be really useful, and it saves me quite a lot of time and money, because again I'm not repeat making. I obviously, if I have it, I'll have my own instructions I'll put in there now. I've found that to be useful. But I'm basically putting all of these projects into these wallets, and I'll give you a scan in a second of what's under the table as a whole. So this, for example, was the wallet / journal cover that I made the other week, and I know where to go and get it. If it was just loose or in a pile or in a box, how would I know where to find it if I wanted to use it? So multiple boxes under here, they're proliferating, and that's not a great thing really. I've probably got too many. I'm showing you it as it is, so there's nothing, no tidying I've done to make this look particularly beautiful. I'm not sure how it could be beautiful, but you can see how many boxes of things I've got under here. That box at the back there, don't know if you can see it, so that box is a box of Happy Mail. I struggle to use my Happy Mail in my journals because I just like looking at it all again, and probably I should use it. You can put quite large pieces of paper in, and even for some of these they can peep out the top because they're just stored in a box. So this is the junk mail journal that I made in last week's video, and I would keep the finished thing in it, but if I've got any sort of part done, or the ingredients, the component parts, like the book page that goes in the middle of the journal, I would put that in the wallet as well. So you've basically got an entire kit for making more if you feel like it, and then I can just grab the whole wallet if I want to. So I don't know if you can see in there, I've got my bare book page journal in here, so where we put a little bit of a wrap around, and I did my new twisted spine on that one to make it really tough. I've got some overspill here. This is I made some pouches, so I've got the pouches in here that I made, and some of the ingredients and the instructions. So transforming images to make lovely supplies, and you can see lots and lots of these. Sometimes when I'm making videos, well, pretty often, I make loads of samples to start with and trial out new techniques, and a lot of these will be slightly different ways of making the item. So I don't always put them on Etsy because I feel like they're not the perfect finished project. Let me know what you think. Should I just put them on anyway? These I made a long time ago. I think I might have to make some more, particularly now I've got a new sewing machine. So these are collaged book pages, and I ran a sewing machine around them and over them, and you can see I've stamped on them as well. There's all the stitches. So I'm using these wallets. They're really, really handy. Last one, it's a masterboard base that I used, and I was showing how to use little dangles. That's just a puzzle piece, and how to make pieces of ephemera that you could use in a journal with little bits of jewellery on. There we go. So that's just a bit of snippet with some beads on a bulb pin. So let's look at the next tip, which is use junk mail envelopes because they are free. And I'm not ashamed to say that I have got this massive bag full of junk mail envelopes, all sorts of shapes and sizes. I probably should have them sorted into neat piles of smaller ones, so ones to use for my little fast and easy junk journal, or larger ones for my best junk journal, but I don't. They are as they come. I'm getting better downstairs at us not absolutely savaging them when we open them up. I've also got Amazon envelopes in here, so those thicker ones, and I'm going to do something to use those as a cover, I think. But this tip is basically use your free supplies like your junk mail envelopes that come through the letterbox and use them to make lovely things. And I promise to give lots of examples of things that I have made using these various supplies and ways of saving money. And this is one of my more recent videos. This is my best junk journal using a large junk mail envelope. I'll just give you an example. Let's pull one out, get rid of those journal cards. So this is a collaged cover, rounded corners, sewn around it, nothing particularly clever. I've used the window, so I put an image from one of the books on the shelf, one of those flower books behind there, and then I have lined it. This has got glossy paper lining. I've filled it with book pages, and then I've decorated it, and it's just so much fun. There's a pocket from a Reader's Digest book. You see, it all comes together now. You see where they all come from. Beautiful birds, a little bit of scrapbook paper, another pocket, just loveliness in my best junk journal. Lots of interactive elements, which I like. And I think at the back of this one, I've also got a pocket again from that Reader's Digest book. So this is a really useful example, I think, of what you can do if you let your imagination fly to use your free goodies that come through the letterbox. None of these are the same. I've been able to use my scraps. I've been able to use bits of university essay. We've got book pages on the front of some of these. So down at the bottom right here, a book page. And then lots and lots of scraps and bits of lovely book page and music paper, one of the categories. There's another example. Lots and lots of loveliness, and you could put writing paper or plain paper in one of these if you wanted. There are no rules, we can do what we like. The next money saving tip I have is to craft with your scraps, and I mean to use all those very little pieces, not the pieces that you can use for collage particularly, but the really tiny ones. And I use them to put in a number of little boxes. I'll show you how I sort and organise them, and then I turn them into snippets. Now my snippets using scraps look something like this. I actually have another box somewhere, I think, and I love making them, so I keep making them, I use them, and then I make some more, and then I use them in different ways. And I've got basically coloured ones and neutral ones. And this is an example of a coloured one. Should we just pull this out? So it's as long as you want it to be. And I've been using all the tiny little offcuts from projects. And I run a zigzag down the middle and just feed longer pieces. I will do a video on this. Longer pieces underneath, and then put those smaller pieces on top in any sort of random way. And I don't think about the colour or the pattern, just let them clash, and you end up with a piece like this. This is quite a wide one. I've done them in a more narrow design. So that's a way of using up little pieces to put into making a snippet. And I'll be honest, I get lots of little pieces of scraps, and you'd be amazed how little goes down in your box of scraps and how long a piece of snippet like this you can make. The base, I would tear up book pages to use the base, so bigger pages, and I'll put about 2 layers of base with extra on top because my sewing machine can cope with that now. I've got other snippets where I've just used scraps of painty paper and map page. I've got some where I've integrated punch outs into them, but let me show you how I organise the paper so that that's easy to happen. I have a box of coloured pieces of paper, and just whenever I cut something off I drop it in it. So I've got those longer pieces here, and all the other little bits and bobs go in there as well. And if it's a neutral colour, I separate that, and I do it at the time of cutting it off the project, whatever that is, because you don't want to have to sit there and organise these after. But these are broadly neutral colours. And then how do we use them? Well, what's the point of something like this? What is the point of something like that? Well, if we're having fun, saving money, they are, here's another box of neutrals. These will get used. I will use them. I will. They will get used as a snippet in the centre of a journal, something like one of my best junk journals. In the middle, I've got a glossy piece of children's book page, and I've added a belly band using, sometimes it's neutral and sometimes it's coloured, and it's quite strong and firm. And then I use that to just tuck maybe one of my handmade envelopes behind, and there's probably some goodies in that. So I don't really throw very much away. I like the challenge of converting things into something else that's beautiful and useful. So I hope so far these money saving tips are useful, and you're getting some inspiration as well at the same time for how you might make things with your more cheap and free supplies. The next money saving point I want to suggest is about the tools that you invest in, or rather making sure that you only invest in the right things and don't double buy. And I'm going to say from experience, I have bought more paper trimmers than I care to admit, and I don't have them all now. I wish in a way that someone had told me what to buy right at the beginning, and I'm just showing you here some of the ones I currently have, and really the ones that I use over and over again, and I've found I couldn't live without. When I started paper crafting, probably the projects I was making were smaller, and in fact at one point in time I really made quite a lot of cards. So I acquired, I think this is from eBay, a small Fiskars paper trimmer. I buy the blades from Amazon, so I replace those when needed. You can see that the measurements here are pretty much worn off. I've used it that much. So this has been absolutely brilliant, but I've found that a more recent acquisition has been the one that I've used more and more often, particularly as my projects have got bigger and I've used book pages more often. So this is the second paper trimmer that I would suggest you have if you want to invest. It's one where I think it's worth going for the more expensive brand, so Fiskars, in order to save money in the long run. So this is Fiskars, and this is Fiskars, and this is the one that allows you to cut 12-inch papers. And in fact it also has, it's very useful, don't know if you can see it, a little metal string down the middle, and I use that to get absolutely precise location of where the trimmer is going to cut, so I can have cuts that are really, really accurate for me. And it also has, I don't know if I can do it with one hand, it also has one of these arms that come out if you want to line up your paper up here, just to make it really accurate. So if you were going to buy trimmers, my money saving tip is to go for the small one and the big one, and that's it. And if you really only wanted to buy one, then I would recommend the big one, because you can always do smaller pieces, but you can't do the big ones on the small one. I do also have, just for visibility, the guillotine style Fiskars trimmer, and that's really sharp, and I use that when I'm cutting through quite a lot of quantity, because I don't think it dulls the blade in the same way that these with the blade do. And although they're not ridiculously expensive, it's a cost, isn't it, replacing some of these consumables. So I do use this from time to time, but I prefer this one with the runner up and down, because I find that this one can move the paper a little bit when you bring the guillotine down. So it can twist a little bit. I don't know if you find that. I also have a large guillotine. I'm not suggesting you buy one of these, but just for visibility, I have one of these, and this is one of those, it's actually ancient. How can I do this with one hand? Really, really old, but very sharp and very, very powerful. Not easy to measure accurately with, but good for cutting through quite a lot. And I've got some similar thoughts on sewing machines, and I've acquired a new one recently, and I'm really excited to share that one with you today. So my tip is that if you want to buy a sewing machine, and I absolutely do support that because I think they are a massive game changer when it comes to creating projects. If you want to buy one, this is what I have. I suggest a modest one. You don't need something with all the bells and whistles. I bought this a few weeks ago, and this was £144 from a shop called Hobbycraft. The model is a 32S, I believe. You can see it's a relatively big one. It's not too heavy, so I can lift it down and put it on my desk. I can change the stitch very easily, and because it's just a dial, it's not an electronic gizmo, I can move that and know that it's locked onto the next stitch very easily, and really easy to use and just beautiful. I'm not an expert stitcher or sewer, but I can make really nice things with it. I knew what I wanted when I bought this because I've actually had a couple of other machines before this one, and I thought I would show you and share my journey to getting to buying this one and why I felt quite confident in choosing a pretty modest machine. Several years ago I bought this one, and at the time it was £10 off, so I paid £40, and I can't get rid of it. I don't know if I'm going to use it again, but I've used it over and over and over again in so many projects, like the journal cards you've seen, the junk journals. I sewed around tags, just so many different projects. And it's a great machine if you're coming from an absolute standing start and knowing nothing. It's also fantastic because it's very light, and look at the size of it. It doesn't take up much room in your craft room. The downsides are it can be, let's say, a producer of rather ugly stitches, and it doesn't go through that many layers because it's not that powerful, but it's a great beginner sewing machine. And if you don't want to lay out a lot of money, and let's be honest, we need to be careful, don't we, where the money goes, this is a great beginner machine. You could say it's a waste of money because you've then gone and bought a different one, but I didn't lay out too much. I have learnt that I love it, learnt how to use it, and then been confident that I don't need to go for the all singing, all dancing machine that is £300. And my last tip for today about saving money when you're making a journal is don't be scared of thinking differently about how you get your supplies, and maybe even asking in shops if they've got anything that they could, let's say, donate. So I'm showing here some, and I do mean just a small fraction, of the beads that I have acquired in the last few weeks. Some are from eBay, but some were from a massive collection of broken jewellery that I got from a local jeweller. And he deals in more second-hand stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that he was acquiring in the collections that he was getting. And it was all broken, it was a matted mess. In fact, I had a lot of fun. This is part of the fun of making our journals, I think, and our creative pieces. I had a lot of fun sorting it all out, and I shared that story in a video, which I will link in the description box down below. I washed the jewellery, I've sorted it out into these are smaller ones, and I've got lots and lots of tubs of these. This is not just the only one. These are some beautiful pieces of brown that came off a necklace. And I've even done some sewing on an art journal. So I've sewn the beads onto the front of a cover of a journal. And I've been enjoying just categorising them, putting them on safety pins and paper clips and bulb pins, so that I've got dangly things to put on a journal and something new for me to play with, something different to keep it all fresh. Think about different ways of sourcing your supplies, because sourcing all of this is part of our journey. It's part of that personal process of putting together a junk journal or any sort of journal, and that is really part of the fun. I was editing the video downstairs, and I just wanted to pop up here into the craft room and close this video out by saying a few things. And the first thing I wanted to say was a very big thank you for coming on this crafty YouTube journey with me and helping me do what I've done for the last 5 years, although a couple of those years I've been out of action, and I've never really stepped back on and said a big thank you for supporting me so much when I came back on. And I've done a few videos now and it seems to be going okay. So I thought I would probably just share my commitment back to you so that hopefully you can carry on coming on this journey with me. And my first commitment is to continue to make projects that we can do together using basic supplies. And when I say basic supplies, what I mean is things that are accessible and available for you to get hold of, and ideally quite affordable / cheap. And secondly, as I hope you already know on this channel, I try really hard in my videos to make the projects things that you can do too, by making the steps in creating them really easy to understand. So I've got over 60 process steps that I've put on my videos and are over on Pinterest for free for you to use, and I just want you to use them. I just want you to be able to make the projects too and have as much fun as I do. And really that brings me to my third point, which is my commitment is to continue to share my passion for paper and everything that I love about making either junk journals or journals, and that's whether that's putting the papers and the signatures in them or filling them with lovely arty stuff. So that was my message to you today. If that works for you, then subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends, share the video, come on the journey with me, and I hope to see you soon.